I can still taste the blood in my mouth, sharp and bitter like a warning. My jaw was pounding, my vision blurred by pain, and the cold, rough concrete curb dug into my hip. I was lying there, stunned, when harsh voices cut through the night air angry. Ugly words that felt so wrong coming from my own family. My daughter's hands were tangled in my hair, pulling me out the front door like I was a stranger, someone who didn't belong. Claire, my little girl, who I once rocked to sleep and sang lullabies to, had become a stranger too. Her husband stood just inside, fists tight, eyes icy cold. All this because I had said no. No to giving them the $3 million they demanded. No to handing over the safety net I'd spent my whole life building. My lips cracked, heart thumping wildly, as I sat shivering beneath the weak glow of the streetlight, wondering when my daughter had turned into someone I didn't know. What they didn't realize was that I had seen this coming. I had been watching quietly, putting plans in place long before the night fell apart. Their betrayal was going to backfire, and it would happen much sooner than they thought. I wasn't helpless. Not yet, it had all started just a week after my 71st birthday. I moved into Claire's house not because I couldn't live on my own, but because she said she missed me. She wanted me closer, and her husband Mark agreed. She painted it like love, like family. I believed her. Their home was a quiet 2-story on the edge of Cedar Grove, with a porch swing that never moved and white shutters that looked like they belonged in a postcard. Claire had even made the guest room in lilac and cream my favorite colors, fresh sheets, soft pillows, and on the knitstand, a framed photo of us from her college graduation. Standing there, suitcase in hand, I thought maybe this time could heal the distance between us. Maybe it could bring us back. It wasn't that I had nowhere else to go. My little apartment in Willow Bend was still mine, a cozy place filled with the things that made it home. My chipped ceramic owl salt shakers, my worn quilt, the familiar smell of my books stacked neatly in the corner. I even kept my part-time job at the library, sorting old archives and leading genealogy workshops. It gave me purpose, and I loved my quiet little life. But Claire wanted more dinners, more time with the grandchildren, more stories shared by the fire. I wanted to believe her. The first week felt like a dream. She brewed chamomile tea for me every night before bed. Mark asked about my work at the library, genuinely interested. The grandchildren sat at my feet as I told stories of our Welsh ancestors and the ship that brought them here. I almost felt silly for doubting her. But then, little things began to change. Claire started dropping hints about money in casual conversations, as if she were just talking, but really it carried weight. She mentioned the cost of refinancing the kids' college funds, how tight things were lately. Mark talked about an investment opportunity, a real estate fund with high returns and low risk. He said it over dinner, chopping roast chicken like it was nothing, but I felt a strange knot tighten in my chest. A few days later, Claire came into my room holding a folder. Inside were bank forms, a notarized page, and a printout of my investment accounts. She sat beside me on the bed, voice soft but careful. "It's just a short-term transfer," she said. "We'd give it back in 6 months. It'll help secure the kids' futures." I asked how she got the information. She smiled, but her eyes didn't smile back. "I've always known your passwords, Mom. I like to check in on you sometimes." That night, I lay awake staring at the slow spin of the ceiling fan. Something inside me broke. I thought of my late husband and how we saved every penny carefully, never touching the principal. I remembered loaning Claire $2,000 for her car repairs money she never gave back. By the end of the second week, I stopped leaving my bedroom door unlocked at night. If you've ever trusted someone enough to live under their roof only to feel the walls closing in, you'll know what I mean when love turns into a transaction and kindness becomes currency. I didn't see it all clearly at first, But something had shifted, and there was no turning back. By the start of the third week, it wasn't subtle anymore. It was loud, clear, and right in front of me. It began with a grocery receipt Claire left on the kitchen counter. She circled certain items in red ink: milk, bread, my special tea, and wrote a total with a note. Your share. Thanks. No greeting, no smile, just cold numbers. That same night, she handed me a printed breakdown of the utility bills, neatly organized, my name at the bottom with a figure beside it. Fairness keeps things clear, Mum, she said politely. That's how families stay strong. Mark didn't say a word, just nodded without looking up from his phone. I didn't argue. I took the paper, went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed. The amount wasn't large, but the message was clear. They didn't want a mother. They wanted a tenant. A few days later, I found Mark in the kitchen flipping through a small black notebook. When he saw me, he shut it too quickly. He smiled like nothing was wrong, but my stomach twisted. That night, when they were out, I checked my personal folder drawer. It was out of place, tabs moved, papers missing. I didn't need more proof. My gut had warned me for weeks. The next morning, over breakfast, Claire brought up estate planning like it was casual conversation. She asked if I'd thought about simplifying my accounts. She told me about a friend's mother who'd put everything in a trust, so there'd be no questions later. It's not about money, she said. It's about clarity, peace of mind. Mark jumped in, offering to help with the paperwork. I've done it before. I can make it easy. I stared at my cereal until the milk grew warm. The spoon felt heavy in my hand. That afternoon, I drove to the park and called my financial advisor. I asked him to put alerts on all transfers, block any account changes, and flag any attempts from unknown locations. He asked if I was okay. I said it was just a precaution, but we both knew better. By the end of the week, Claire handed me paper samples for transfer of authority. Her eyes locked on mine, daring me to open them. I didn't. I set them aside and asked about the grandchildren's school instead. 2 days later, Mark cornered me in the garage. His voice was smooth, but his words were a warning. You're lucky to have a daughter who cares so much, he said. Money only causes problems when people get secretive. I stepped past him and locked my bedroom door. That night, I went through every account, changed passwords, wrote down trusted names, and hid backup copies of important papers in my suitcase lining. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. By the fourth week, the house felt different. Mark's footsteps sounded heavier in the halls. Claire stopped knocking and just came in. The grandchildren seemed too busy to spend time with me. One morning, I found my pill organizer open on the dresser instead of under my bed. The Tuesday slot was empty, even though I hadn't taken any pills yet. I didn't panic. I threw those pills away and started fresh with my travel stash. From then on, I carried my essentials in a zipped pouch and never left my coffee unattended. One afternoon, I overheard Mark on the phone, talking too loud about equity, consolidation, and legal guardianship. Later, Claire asked me to sign papers for their refinance. When I saw my name listed as co-owner on a second mortgage, I asked why. She paused, then said, "That must be a clerical error." That was when I realized how far they were willing to go. That night, I pulled out a manila envelope hidden under my suitcase lining. Inside were records from my late husband's accounts, notarized copies of my trust, and a list of all my assets. I'd kept everything separate since the day he died. They didn't know about half of it. The next day, I quietly went to the bank and met with the branch manager. There had been 2 failed login attempts from an IP address linked to Mark's business. I asked them to lock down everything with the highest security voice verification. In-person changes only, no exceptions. When I got home, dinner was on the table. Claire was rinsing dishes and didn't look up. Mark leaned against the fridge with his arms crossed, watching me. "Has anyone been in my room?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Claire shrugged. "Maybe one of the kids went in looking for scissors." Mark added, "Maybe you misplaced something." They said it too quickly. I didn't answer. I just went back upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and reached for the landline I had hidden behind the bookshelf. It was an old number, one I hadn't used in years, but I kept it for emergencies. My late husband and I had once used it when we were targeted an aerial estate scam. I called my lawyer's office. His assistant picked up and I gave her the code word. She transferred me right away. Within minutes, my attorney confirmed he could lock down everything. I asked him to trigger the fail-safe in my trust, removing any shared authority, alerting my offshore accounts and reporting a suspected fraud attempt to Adult Protective Services. I wasn't accusing them directly yet, but I wanted something on record. Then I packed a small overnight bag, just essentials. That evening, as I came down the stairs, I saw Mark standing by the fireplace holding my flash drive. He didn't say a word, but his smug smile said enough. Claire stood behind him, her face unreadable. "I'm going out for a walk," I said. They didn't stop me. At the corner of the block, a black sedan was waiting. My attorney had sent a driver. We drove straight to a small house in Ames, a place deed in the name of an old college friend who owed me a favor. No one knew about it except me and her. The next day, I froze all joint assets, placed a fraud alert on my accounts, and transferred everything into a protected, irrevocable trust. For the first time in weeks, I slept, not deeply, but without checking the locks in the middle of the night. The silence in that safe house felt different. It didn't echo like Claire's big house had. It wrapped around like a blanket. For 3 days, I stayed inside with the curtains drawn. I didn't watch the news. Didn't answer the phone. I thought about how it had come to this. How 2 people I once trusted, one of them, my own child, had looked at me and seen not love, not family, but a bank account. On the 4th morning, an email arrived from the bank. Someone had tried to log in using outdated credentials. Then another email came from my lawyer. The asset transfers were complete. Everything was now locked, in my name alone. That same afternoon, I called Adult Protective Services and gave them every detail. Dates, documents, even the photo I had taken of my open drawer. The investigator on the other end didn't give me false comfort, but she said something I hadn't heard in a long time. "You did the right thing," she told me. "And you're not alone." That night, I drove into the city to stay with my friend Patrice. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a plate of at casserole and showed me to the guest room. It was only then, lying in her quiet house, that the weight of it all settled in my chest. This wasn't just about money. They hadn't only tried to take what I'd saved. They had tried to erase me, to take away my right to decide, my independence, my life on my own terms. And they had failed. 2 weeks passed. I stayed quiet in Patrice's condo, moving through the days like I was learning to breathe again. No social media, no phone calls unless they were necessary. I walked early in the mornings before the sun fully rose. Missteps slow on the gravel, listening to the sound of the world waking up. Then a letter came. It had been sent to my old address, but forwarded by my lawyer. Inside was a court petition filed by Claire and Mark. They wanted a hearing to declare me unfit to manage my own estate. They claimed I was mentally compromised, that I was being isolated and manipulated for my money. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost attached were sworn statements from 2 of their friends. I barely knew them, but in these papers they swore I had been confused and forgetful. And they even claimed I had asked the same question 3 times at a barbecue. Lies printed in black ink, now part of public record. I took the papers to my lawyer. She went surprised. "We'll answer this," he said calmly. He listed what we'd include: my medical evaluations, statements from my financial advisor, neighbors, and church members I'd worked alongside for years, people who actually knew me. But before we could move forward, I got another call from the detective who had spoken to me weeks before. They had obtained security footage from bank branches. Twice, mandatory to access accounts in my name using documents flagged as altered. It wasn't enough for immediate charges, but paired with the other evidence, it was building into a case. They planned to take it to the district attorney. That night, I sat at Patricia's kitchen table and told her the whole story. Every detail had kept to myself. She listened without interrupting, and when I was finished, she made a suggestion I hadn't thought of. "Write a letter to the judge," she said. "Not as a legal defense, as a person. Let them hear your voice before they see your face." It took me a day to decide. When I sat down to write, it poured out. I wrote about raising Claire, about the years we'd been close, about the slow silence that had replaced her laughter. I wrote about the moment I realized I was no longer safe under her roof. I didn't use fancy words or anger. I wrote simply, honestly. Protecting myself wasn't cruelty, I explained. It was survival. My lawyer included the letter in our official response. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Those 3 weeks passed quietly, but it was the kind of quiet where you feel the storm waiting. I didn't hear from Claire or Mark, but whispers about the case made their way through the community. Old friends left voicemails. I didn't threaten them. Not yet. On the morning of the hearing, I wore a navy suit I hadn't touched since my husband's funeral. My hair was pulled back smooth. I carried no bag, just a folder with my name on it. Courtrooms are colder than they look. I sat beside my lawyer. Claire and Mock sat across the aisle. She wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked once, then away. Their lawyer spoke first, painting me as unstable, isolated, and unable to make decisions. He called witnesses who offered vague, second-hand stories. Then it was our turn. My lawyer presented the medical evaluations, the statements, bottom line. Finally, he handed my letter to the judge. She read it silently. When she looked up, she said she rarely saw such clarity from someone accused of incapacity. She dismissed their petition on the spot, calling it an abuse of process. She even referred the matter for review. We left without a word to Claire or Mark. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I sat on Patrick's balcony. The air smelled like rain, the sky painted in pale gold. For the first time in months, I felt my heartbeat settle into something steady. The week after the hearing felt strange. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like walking off a battlefield alone, carrying the silence of what had been lost. Patrice came by with groceries and a small bouquet of tulips. We didn't talk much. She just sat with me while I watered her plants and sorted through the kitchen drawers. My hands didn't shake anymore. They moved slowly, steadily, like they had been waiting for this quiet. That night, I opened a small storage box I brought from my old apartment. Inside were photos, old journals, and a leather folder of letters Mark had sent me when I was young. And he was still trying to charm his way into the family. Promises to take care of me when I'm old, written in messy handwriting. I stared at one for a while, then set it aside. I reached for my own journal. Not the one for bank passwords, but the one I hadn't touched since my husband died. I opened to a blank page and wrote 3 words. I am still here. I didn't fully know what I meant, but it felt real. 3 days later, I met with my lawyer, not for legal matters, but to talk about the Elenina Fund, the charity I'd created in my grandmother's name. He told me the first round of grants could be sent out in 6 months. Applications were already arriving. from women who had lived through the same kind of financial betrayal I had. He asked if I wanted my name to stay anonymous. I thought about it for a long time. Being visible meant telling my story, letting others know they weren't alone. I told him no. My name would stay on it. That evening, I walked through the neighborhood. I passed a park where kids would chase each other in circles, their laughter floating in the warm air. I sat on a bench for a while, letting the sun touch me face. I thought about Claire. Not with anger, not even with disappointment, just a kind of stillness. She had made her choice. Mark had made his, and now I had made mine. When I got home, I made tea and opened a blank document on my laptop. I started writing my story. Not as a legal case, not as a speech, just as a life. My life. The first line was same as my journal. I am still here. 3 weeks after putting my name on theft fund publicly, a letter came from a federal investigator. It was simple, direct. They were reopening an inquiry into Mark. When I met the investigator the next day, he told me suspicious financial transfers had been flagged in the county's elder exploitation investigation, and Mark and Claire's names kept appearing. I gave them everything I knew, not with emotion, just facts, clear and sharp. They had even subpoenaed bank voice recordings. In one, a man claimed to be my son-in-law using my full name and social security number, authorizing a wire transfer. My voice was never on that recording. That night, I sat alone in the dark living room. I didn't feel fear, only a low hum in my chest. The weight of knowing the truth was finally catching up to them. 2 days later, Patrice stopped by again. This time, she brought a thick binder filled with reports for the Elanina Fund. The small board we had quietly formed wanted to grow the program. More grants, more outreach, and even a partnership with a local university to teach women digital skills and financial safety. Near the end of the proposal was an idea for a speaker series. Women over 60 sharing their stories of survival. My name was already penciled in for the first talk. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. That night, I sat on the balcony. The summer heat pressed in around me. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. But I didn't flinch. I thought about what it meant to speak openly. Not whisper, not hide. Not just for myself, but for the countless women he'd read about in the fund's early applications. Stories that sounded too familiar. Money taken, trust broken, control disguised as care. My story wasn't rare. That was the hardest truth to face. 2 weeks later, I stood in a small community room at the public library. Folding chairs, a pot of coffee, and no microphones. I told my story, not every detail, but enough. I said I was 69. I said I had raised a daughter I loved with my whole heart, and that over time she walked away from in 100 small choices. I spoke about Mark, about the silence he used like a weapon. About the morning I realized survival wasn't enough, that dignity mattered more than peace. When I finished, the room was quiet. No clapping, no cheering, just the sound of people holding the weight of what they'd heard. Afterward, a woman named Eloise came up to me. She was 73. Her daughter had drained her home equity and disappeared. She had never told anyone until that night. Her voice cracked when she spoke. But she didn't stop. And in that moment I understood. This was the real legacy. Not the fund. Not the court victory. Not even clearing me name. It was standing in that room and letting another woman breathe a little easier because I spoke first. By late summer, the Elanina Fund's name began circulating quietly among community centers and retirement groups. I never wanted it to be big, but sometimes the most honest seeds grow on their own. When a women's center in Greenville invited me to Speak, I agreed. The day of the event, I wore a simple blue knit top and my old silver watch, the one Mark had given me decades ago. I didn't wear it for sentiment, only because it still kept perfect time. I didn't rehearse. I just told the truth again, this time about what came after. Learning how to live alone again without flinching at every sound. How to cook for one without feeling lonely, how paying my own bills became a quiet act of pride. Afterward, a woman with salt and pepper hair walked me to my car. Her name was Judy. Her story was familiar. A daughter who had taken control of her finances. A son-in-law who handled all her accounts until she suddenly couldn't access her own money. She whispered that she had no one else to tell. I gave her number for the women's center and told her to call in the morning. She clutched the paper like it was life itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of theory of all these stories, piling up like autumn leaves. I wondered if I was strong enough to keep holding them. 2 days later, my lawyer called. The federal investigation had moved forward. Charges were being prepared. Identity theft, elder abuse, financial coercion. Mark's name was on the list. So was Claire's. I wasn't shocked, but it still stung. A week later, a journalist reached out. She was writing a national story about financial abuse against seniors and wanted to feature the Elanina Fund. She asked if I would go on record. My name, my face, my words. I told her I needed a day to think. That afternoon, I walked through streets I hadn't seen in years. Past the little bakery that now sold vegan muffins, past post office, past the community theatre where my husband and I once watched plays from the back row. Field had kept moving all this time, even while I had been stuck in survival mode. By the time I got home, I knew my answer. I said yes. The article came out a week later. That I was in a photo outside the library after one of my talks. Sunlight, catching the edge of my hair. The headline was simple. She spoke up. I braced myself for calls from Claire or Mark. But none came, just silence. And for once, the silence didn't hurt. It felt earned. A few days later, a young woman from the local university emailed me. Her grandmother had been one of the first women to receive a grant from the Elanina Fund. She said she cried when she read the acceptance letter, and now she wanted to intern with us to help other women feel seen and safe. I told her yes, not just because we needed the help, but because I saw something in her. Proof that what we were building wasn't about me anymore. It was bigger. One afternoon while I was going through grant paperwork, I realized something. I hadn't thought about Claire or Mark in halls. Not from fear, not from anger. I just hadn't thought of them. They were finally gone from my head. That, more than any court win or headline, felt like the real beginning. A week later, I came home from the hardware store and found an envelope on my porch table. Cream-colored, thick, no return address. My name written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. I recognized instantly. It was from Claire. Inside was a single page. She said she'd heard about the fund, seen my picture in the paper. She wrote that Mark had told her they'd made mistakes and they wanted to make peace. She invited me to dinner just to talk. Is it the letter down and boiled water for tea? I didn't need to think about it. E wasn't going, but I didn't throw it away either. It sat on the counter for 2 days until I forgot about it completely. Then Friday came, the day she'd suggested. At 7:30 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Finally, I picked up. It was a nurse. From the hospital. Claire had been admitted with chest pains. They'd found my number listed as next of kin. She was stable, but she was alone. She'd asked for me. I sat on the bed, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the faint hum of machines in the background. I thought of the woman who had dragged me by the hair, who had looked at me like I was nothing. And then I thought of the little girl who used to braid my hair and whisper that I smelled like lavender. So I went, not because I forgave her, but because I needed to see her as she was now. The hospital room was dim and quiet when I walked in. Claire looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pulled back loosely and Ford dripping slowly beside her. She opened her eyes, blinking at me. For a moment there was no recognition. Then her mouth moved and she said my name. I didn't answer. I just pulled the chair closer and sat down. The nurse gave me a small nod before closing the door behind her. We sat in silence for a while. Then Claire spoke. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I read everything, she said. The articles, the interviews. I didn't realize how far I had gone. I didn't know what I was becoming. She paused, her eyes darting toward the window. Mark pushed me, she continued. I thought I was protecting us. I thought I was doing the right thing. I listened, but I didn't respond. Then she asked something I didn't expect. Did you make the Ilananophon to send me a message? I shook my head. It wasn't about revenge, Claire. It was about breathing again. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. I can't undo what I've done, she said quietly. But maybe we could start. Again. Not as mother and daughter, not with labels. Just two people who once shared something real. I stood slowly. I don't hate you, I told her. But I don't belong to you anymore. My peace isn't tied to your apology. Then I walked out. Outside, the night sky was deep blue. The hospital parking lot buzzing with quiet motion. I exhaled, not relief. Exactly, but something heavier and deeper, like setting down a weight I'd carried for too long. That night, I made soup at home. Not because I was hungry, but because I wanted something warm and still. I lit a candle, not for prayer, but for the calm flicker of its light. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking. Once. The next morning, I brewed a strong cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the postman's steady routine. This time, he didn't just drop mail in the box. He came to the door and handed me an envelope directly. It was from the office of the United States Attorney. I sat down before opening it. My hands didn't shake. Inside, the letter confirmed what I had hoped for quietly. Federal charges were being filed against Mark. Fraud, coercion, elder financier labus. My name appeared more than once, not as a victim, but as a key witness. And then I saw something that made me stop. The investigation had started with an anonymous tip to the IRS months ago. The person who'd made it, Claire. Before the dinner invitation, before the hospital, she had already turned him in. I read that line twice slowly. I didn't know if it was guilt, fear, or something else. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had helped dismantle the house of lies she had once helped build. A week later, a federal officer came to my door. He wore plain clothes, but the badge in his wallet was real. He told me my testimony could help close the case faster. Mark had already been questioned, and the moment he learned Claire had cooperated, his tone shifted. There was no arrest yet, but it was coming. After he left, I walked through my house slowly. I touched the old wooden door frames, the kitchen counter, the chair by the window where I read in the mornings. These were the things they hadn't touched, the parts of my life that were still mine. That evening, I took out the journal I'd been keeping since I left their house. I didn't write about them this time. I wrote about me, about the mornings I now spent without fear, about the quiet pride of paying my own bills, about planting flowers in the yard just because I wanted to. A few days later, my lawyer called with something you next pay. Months ago, before everything came to light, A document had been prepared, one I had no memory of. Signing. It would have transferred nearly $3 million from my account into an entity Mark controlled. It never went through because of a bank alert I'd requested. Buried in the fine print was Claire's name, listed as a beneficiary if I were ever declared incapacitated. I sat with that knowledge for a long time. I thought of the meals I'd cooked for her as a child, the sacrifices I'd made so she'd never have to feel lack. And I thought of the woman she became, the one Woe had planned for, my absence. That here I was, still here, still mine. The case against them moved forward quietly. I didn't follow every update. I didn't heed to. My focus was somewhere else now. One crisp autumn morning, I walked into the courthouse alone. The trust was annulled. The frozen funds released. Every false signature nullified. It wasn't a grand moment. No applause, no speeches. But something inside me finally exhaled. When I got home, I went to the backyard and knelt at the potting bench. I planted pansies, hearty flowers that survive frost and return each spring. As I pressed the soil down, I realized that was what I had done too. I had survived the cold and I had come back. A week later, Mark left a voicemail. His voice was low. He said he was sorry. He said Claire wanted to talk. I deleted it. That same week, I found an old photo in my mail. Claire holding her daughter, smiling in the sun. I didn't cry. And I didn't throw it away. I put it in the desk drawer where I keep things that matter but no longer define me. There's a quiet in my life now. But it's not empty. It's clear. It's the kind of quiet that comes when you've cleaned out the echoes that don't belong anymore. If there's anything this taught me, it's that protecting yourself is not cruelty. It's love. The kind you give yourself when no one else will. I know. Longer live in reaction to what they did. I live in response to who I choose to become. And if you're reading this and someone is trying to erase the part of you that knows your worth, I hope you remember this. It is never too late to take your voice back because you are still here, and that is